welcome. We are thrilled to have you join us today, and we are absolutely thrilled to have Kathryn DeBoer from WestGroup Research join us. And I just want to make some real quick announcements, and we will jump right into the presentation. First, I would like to thank our sponsors. These companies really make it easy for the AMA Phoenix to do what we do here. So we thank them. We thank all that they do for us. I particularly want to thank Taylor Wellman, who is our host from Financial Potion. She is our video expert. So if you find you have video needs, please reach out to Taylor. And I would like to point out Eileen Burrick, who I believe is on the line, and if she's not, she will be. She is our graphics person here for the AMA Phoenix. And again, she makes our life so much easier and prettier too, I might add. And then last out of our sponsor list, I would like to thank WestGroup Research. Number one, that's where we got our speaker from today. And number two, WestGroup has been supporting the AMA Phoenix for a really long time. Not exactly sure how long, but we have our in-person meetings at WestGroup's facilities, and we have had them there as long as I've been on board. And I know it's been even beyond that. So it's been probably somewhere in the 18 to 20 year range that they've been supporting us. So WestGroup, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And then we also would like to thank our supporters. These are the companies that employ us, the board members, and they really support us in supporting the AMA Phoenix. And that is really important that we have this support from our company. So we thank them. And then without any further delay, I just would like to get into introducing Kathryn DeBoer. She is the Senior Vice President at WestGroup Research. She is also the Chief Quality Officer at WestGroup Research. And Kathy, she has worked in the public sector, both in Arizona and throughout the United States. And she has worked in the private sector, where she works with clients on customer experience, branding efforts, and marketing communications in a multitude of industries. I also just found out today that Kathy is a past president here at the AMA Phoenix, and that WestGroup Research has had a total of 5 past presidents. So like I said, when I say WestGroup Research supports us, they really support us. So without further delay, I would like to turn it over to Kathy, and I would like to thank Kathy for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Thank you, Kathy.
And thank you. We appreciate the opportunity and are excited to share with you what we have been experiencing, not only in the past 6 to 8 months, but in the last 5 to 8 years. Market research has really taken a left turn. And so we felt it was important to help everybody understand what was going on and kind of some tricks of the trade on how to cope with everything. So just to jump in a little bit about who we are. We have been around since 1959, so we are Arizona's longest standing market research firm. I myself have been with the company for 30 years, and a lot of our staff has hung around for a long time, as well as our newcomers. And so we are very proud of our Arizona roots. We also are what we consider ourselves to be an all-in partner for our clients, which means we are there to support them. As we say, we want to make you look good. And so we make sure that everything we do is done of high quality with integrity, that we can be responsive to their needs and help them to make the decisions that they need as they move forward. We also are a full service, which means that we cover everything from consultation to design, through the data collection and analysis process, through to presentations. Some clients use us for all of that, and others will use our expertise more in the data collection area as they move forward. Our home is Arizona, but that doesn't limit the type of work that we do. We have a lot of local and public and private sector Arizona clients, but also through the Southwest and nationally. But we also have a lot of global clients. And you'll certainly recognize some of the names. We work for Apple and Spotify. We've worked for Samsung and FedEx are some of those, as well as the local environment as well. And as Anna mentioned, just a call out to my coworkers, yeah, starting going all the way back to 1960, one of the first years of the chapter, Dave Gorley from ASU was president, and then followed by Ted, and then myself, and then Ed Burgo, and then Stephanie was our most recent. And we also have other folks who sit on the board in other responsibilities, but it looks like maybe we've got to start controlling one of our newcomers to jump in. It's been 20 years. So we'll see what we can do about that. So as I mentioned at WestGroup, what we do, research design is obviously a core competency, and that is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge today, as you will find out as we go through, including sampling protocols. And we list those as a core competency because it is not the old sampling protocol that I started the industry with all those years ago. You've really got to be able to stay on top and make sure that your clients are getting a representative sample. And then, as I mentioned, data collection, we do everything from mail to telephone to online, qualitative, all of those in person. And then analytics, we do from simple reporting all the way through complex analytics and data visualization, as well as executive presentations to whatever audiences we need to. So really what I want to accomplish today is just to help everybody understand specifically what is all involved right in these days on giving a high quality project designed and executed well. There's so many changes and so many things to be aware of. We wanted to equip you so that you know how to be strategic in your survey, to have the right sample and data collection mode, so that you're confident using the data or providing it to your clients so they can make impactful decisions not only for your organization or potentially for your clients' organizations. So what I'll do is I'll first go through kind of the recent and current disruptors in market research, what's really impacted and pushed the industry in a different direction. And then we'll talk about how we responded on the qualitative side as well as on the quantitative side to kind of address those disruptors and overcome them or incorporate them, however it may be. And then we'll make sure that we leave time for feedback and questions. So I ran across this quote from Forbes. It was right after the COVID hit, but it really does summarize how important data is, that we should expect that those companies that emerge faster and stronger from the current crisis will be those firms that have demonstrated they can be nimble, act quickly, and adapt. In short, these are likely to be firms that are data-driven, that can react quickly to changes in the market, can seize upon opportunities, can redeploy and reposition people and assets, and have learned to compete on data and analytics, and have overcome the challenges to build a well-established and lasting data culture within their organizations. Obviously, we're market research, so we strongly believe that this is important, and we certainly are feeling this from our clients as well. And for today, I want to make sure that we talk about not all data are equal. It's all about quality data. We are getting, clients are pushing, not surprisingly, for quick turnaround. They're pushing for lower costs. They want us to predict the future. And some of these things are there all the time. This is not necessarily new, but certainly the intensity behind these has kicked in with COVID as well. But the challenge is that many of the trending data collection approaches can lead to bad data if it's not done correctly. There are a lot of pitfalls. You can make some assumptions that you shouldn't make. And there are definitely things that will trip you up if you're not working with a market research professional who really understands those potential pitfalls and help you navigate that so that you can get the effective and quality data that you're really looking for. So let's take a look at some of the disruptors. We start with a difficulty in achieving random samples. And I will dig into each one of these separately, so I won't go into detail here. There are changes in the reach of sample sources that may make it hard for you to target your audience. Increasing numbers of wireless-only households, respondent mistrust and fatigue, declining response rates as a result of that. What's the influence of DIY survey tools? And how do you address the client need and demand for quicker and research turnaround? Online panels are very big and everybody uses them, including WestGroup, very an integral part, but that's not without needing to understand how panels work. And then obviously COVID-19, can't have conversations today without at least addressing that. So let's jump in. So talking about the loss of a random sample, if you think back when, date myself, when I started in research, we were doing in-home, door-to-door surveys. So you were going by census blocks, address blocks, and the research data collection company, we would randomly pick those census blocks so they would give us a representative sample, and the interviewers would go door-to-door, and we would have quotas by age and income, but they were targeted by those blocks. And so all households were randomly selected, and the opt-in was opening their door. And now today, everything is opt-in. You've got a telephone. People can pick up the phone or not pick up the phone. They have caller ID, so they know and recognize numbers. You've got spam filters on mobile phones as well as email. And the mobile phone providers are empowering respondents to filter out or ignore phone numbers. You can set up emails and send them to be blacklisted. And then, of course, if you're trying to do work by mail, so many people have opted into electronic, paperless stuff. So the stuff does come, the things that do come in the mail are considered junk mail. So trying to send a survey through the mail can be problematic as well. Then there really isn't a one-size-fits-all source for sample anymore. As I mentioned, we used to go through addresses, and that obviously going door to door isn't a wise solution anymore. But now phone numbers are portable. Landlines are no longer based to a home. They become cell phone numbers. And as we know, cell phone numbers move with users across town and country. So just because you randomly draw a sample of phone numbers from Arizona doesn't mean that all those phone numbers are being used in Arizona. There isn't a great source for purchase lists of quality email addresses. You'll have multiple email addresses per household. You have multiple email addresses for individuals, and a lot of individuals have kind of their junk email address, and we don't know what those are. And email addresses frequently change. And then finally, residential addresses, we kind of come full circle, are most random. I mean, there's still PO boxes, and there is the challenge that we never know who actually receives it, or if they receive it, or who opens it. So clearly, there's a huge challenge out there when it comes to finding a good, reliable sample source for research. And just to expand on the phone issue a little bit, we have this increasing wireless-only households. And so you've got, in Arizona, these numbers were just recently pulled from a research study published by APOR, the American Association of Public Research. 78% of Arizona households are either wireless only or wireless mostly. And the challenge from that as a research perspective is that the Telephone Consumer Protection Act requires manual dialing of cellular phone numbers. You can't, we used to, when we just do random digit dial, we all invested in auto dialers where the number would pop up for the interviewer and all they had to do was hit one button and the phone would dial, and so they could dial very quickly. But you cannot do that with a wireless. And now, because landlines can be ported to cellular numbers, even if you purchase a landline random digit dial sample, you don't know, honestly, if they're landlines. They may be cell phones. So the only way to protect yourself as a research company is to manual dial all of our phone numbers. So we've had to go back in time and make sure that we are manually dialing all of those, which adds to the cost. It takes interviewers longer to work through the sample and dial it. And as I mentioned, wireless providers are pushing spam filters, empowering the owners, and the wireless numbers are portable, so we can't rely on those for targeting. And then that bigger graph just shows that, especially, not surprisingly, up to over 80% of those 25 to 35 are wireless only. So the problem is only going to get worse as the population ages. And we all know, if you're in market research, that getting those folks under 35 is our biggest challenge. Then you end up with a respondent mistrust or fatigue. Survey participants are reluctant to share personal information. You know, we've all had the personal identity theft and the problems with databases being hacked and stolen. And it makes people reluctant to talk about their, perhaps it's personal health issues, or provide income information or household information, you know, number of people in the household, or do they have children? All of that makes people nervous these days because of everything that has been going on. Then there's the telemarketing at a real survey. The telemarketing firm can make you sound very legitimate, and then all of a sudden you think you've just completed a survey, and suddenly you're being bombarded with requests to purchase or calls to follow up on something. And it's playing a survey saturated world. I mean, you can't go anywhere with phone, text, email, social media, sales receipts, every service interaction. It feels like, you know, if you change a windshield out, if you buy a pair of shoes, if you log on to your school's website, there'll be a parent survey. They're just everywhere. And so as a result, fewer people are willing to respond to surveys. And this results in an increased cost. And just as an example, we used to, when we would buy sample, we would assume maybe 10 pieces of sample to one completed interview, and then it went to 20 to 1. And I would say in many situations, we were at 40 to 50, needing 40 to 50 pieces of sample to get one completed interview. And that obviously takes a lot of time and expense in order to find it, not to mention the response bias that goes with that. DIY survey tools, can be a blessing and a curse. Anyone can create and send their own survey. It creates an expectation and delivers on quick surveys. They can be done lower cost and in-house. But the challenge with that is that not everyone is trained in survey questionnaire design and or response bias. And so, you get things that are leading, that you're asking people to tell you how happy they are, assuming that they are happy, or you have a scale that only provides 3 positives and 1 negative option. Or the question is multi-part and you're not sure how to answer any of it. And what happens is that poorly designed surveys not only give the end user bad data or meaningless data, they may not know that they're getting bad data or meaningless data because they don't realize they've constructed it poorly, but it can give consumers a negative experience. And so they're like, well, this is silly. Why am I answering this? I can't give my true answer anyway. And then not everyone is trained to analyze or interpret the survey data. And so you've got to be careful too that people don't run off with an assumption if they're looking at a small sample size, or if they don't understand how to work with the data. Like I say, all clients are looking for quicker access to survey results. DIY has helped push that along, but we've also, there's 24/7 real-time dashboards. You see those all along, and these are all very useful tools if they're used correctly. Text analytics is another way to speed up the review of qualitative data, letting machine learning work and help to code up those responses or search through and find those themes. All the access to big data out there, and social media, and all of that can, that changes every minute. The landscape is continuously changing, and clients are really looking to understand that. And I ran across a quote by Jay Baer, which many of you may know because he's a great marketing speaker, but he says, the future of marketing is not big data, but big information. And so and that really fits because big data is only one thing, one tool that you have in your tool belt. Clients are looking for big amounts of information, and it's our job to find the best way to collect that big information. Panels, again, are one of those mixed blessings. It gives a convenient access to broad populations, worldwide populations. They don't work quite as well when you try to narrow down to local, whether it's by city or by other smaller portions. But diverse populations, hard to reach populations tend to be more accessible than ever before to the reach of panels. They are quick to turn around and they can be very cost effective. But the caveat here is that without thorough vetting and careful monitoring and cleaning, the panel sample providers are often rife with fake or cheating respondents. So you've got to be aware of what those are, and we will talk through kind of how to protect yourself. And then COVID hit, and it's a complete culture shock for all of us. Everything has changed. We're all waiting for a new normal. But research has been notably impacted at multiple levels. Tracking studies have blown up. Whenever you get something like this, you've got an asterisk next to 2020 from here on forward. What worked before 2020 may not work in 2020, and clients need to know that. But the problem is that a lot of clients are suffering. Research budgets are slashed or on hold, but yet they still need information and they want a quick turnaround. So how do you balance that? How do you achieve a quick quality data? And some data collection methodologies are not allowed or have to be modified significantly. We had two very large projects here in Arizona that were going on, and they were in-person intercepts. One for the Arizona Office of Tourism, the other for Maricopa Association of Governments. We were wrapping up both of those projects and had maybe a couple of months of data collection of year-long projects, and we had to stop them because obviously no one was going out to be intercepted, and certainly no one wanted to be approached by an interviewer. So what do? The one silver lining, at least initially, was that telephone response rates were up. People were home, they were bored, willing to pick up the phone. Hey, let's see who's calling me. And so that there was that impact. So let's look at some solutions, starting with qualitative research. You see all the different techniques. Those are all there. They've been there before, and we're using them now. We're just using them differently. So the biggest change is obviously to in-person meetings, in-person focus groups, one-to-one executive interviews. Those all have stopped. They're just beginning to start back up again, but they were replaced by online video focus group discussions, online text chat discussions, using various tools, online bulletin board discussions that allow you to post discussions that are kept open for 2 to 3 days, doing virtual interviews. Or you've got to modify your facility to accommodate social distancing or provide partition space around the table. And I put a picture of what we've done at our office is that we have a mega room that we used for large focus groups and mega groups before. And now that's become our focus group room. Because now we can fit 8 to 10 people and keep them socially distanced in a room that's well ventilated. We've had a few clients that have wanted to go that route yet. I was sitting at a round table last week, and one of the people was saying that their client asked them to recruit people to in-person focus groups, but the moderator was going to be virtual. And we were all looked at each other and said, boy, I wonder how that will work. Please, somebody tell us how that works. But they wanted to do it so that they could hold focus groups in different cities, but have the same moderator do it without traveling. So people are getting really creative on trying to work through these. So online does give you increased diversity in groups, especially with geography. Right after COVID hit, I was supposed to be helping to recruit for 3 focus groups in the state of Wyoming. And they were like, now what do we do? And so we moved to an online bulletin board. We could recruit people from all over the state. They didn't have to show up at a specific time. We left the board open for 3 days and let people respond to the groups. And they were just blown away by the depth and the quality of the information. And thought, wow, why do we bother with focus groups if we can do this? Online can produce easier rapport with participants and may be easier to break down walls, especially with some key populations. We just finished up some focus with teens. Teen groups can be very awkward in person. People are just so sensitive about their looks and stuff, but they know online, they get online, you can, they're great with that. And so it was much easier to work in that environment. You have more flexibility, as I mentioned, you don't have to travel, you can look at different times, and it's easier to get participants and clients together that may be hard to reach and hard to pull together in a single facility or in person. But there is still in-person benefits for participants and client relationships. Some things just don't work well online, and you really want to have that interaction. And so we fully expect that those will continue to be used. There's probably just going to be a little higher scrutiny as to is the risk there, and what do we want to do, and how important is it, and can we do it another way that might be better. I'm not going to go through much of these next two slides, but just some considerations that need to be thought through when you're looking for an online qualitative. You've got the live online, Zoom style, which another option is text-based discussion where they're just texting or chatting in a box, and you've got the online bulletin board discussions. And those discussions are based on all of those considerations listed below, ranging from group size to the time you want to talk to them, whether you need real time or if it's okay to have it delayed over time, the level of interaction, the need for the participants to interact, all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And then you can see that the live online Zoom, they're most mirror the focus group situation because it's at a set time with a few number of participants that can interact with each other. With a text-based discussion, it's quick, you can do it in real time. It can be anonymous, but again, it's just gut level reactions. You're not going in depth. And then online bulletin boards can be thoughtful, in-depth discussions, asking people to participate over a course of 2-3 days. You can have 30+ people in a single group discussion. And it can be very flexible and allow the clients to interact with participants as well, or they can be anonymous. On the quantitative side of things, again, there's all different quantitative methodologies, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So let's just talk through some of the solutions or changes that have come about in the last number of years. Multi-mode data collection. This is probably the biggest large-scale change that has happened in the market research industry. It always used to be you had one mode of data collection. You either did a web survey, or you did a telephone survey, or you did a mail study. And now, because you've got low response rates, you've got increasing costs, the problem with sample and not being able to find one solid sample source that allows you to get representation from all population sectors, we're now using multiple data collection modes. I noticed as people were checking in that two of my clients checked in that have utilized that. Town of Queen Creek, we do a study for them every couple of years, and we've always been telephone. And this year, with declining response rates and representative, we ended up, we mailed a postcard allowing people to respond online. We did telephone, and we even did some in-person intercepts to try to reach some of those hard to reach populations. The state of Michigan, Chun Chuen, nice to see your name on there. We did a large scale study of Michigan residents that started with a mail survey, followed by telephone and online versions. And so there are just lots of choices, but it's very intense, and it has to be well thought through. Sample sources, as I mentioned, you've got to understand what sample sources are available to you so that you know what data collection mode is possible. You've got a probability-based sample, which basically means there's a random base to it. So if you have a random telephone sample or cell phone sample, if you've got an address-based sample, or you've got a fully list of all your customers, you can randomly select from them. Now, they may have an opt-in methodology to collect the data, but at least your base is random. When you go onto the non-probability samples, there is no random selection. It's all a convenience and opt-in through the online panels to emailed invitations to targeted bases. And you've got to be aware of not only who's responding, but who's not responding, and what's the bias are you introducing by the various sources that you may be using to find participants. The challenges in multimode surveys are a lot. Respondent selection. Is the selected respondent comparable between methods? Telephone, you'd often ask for, I want to speak to the youngest male under the age of 25. But how do you do that in a mail survey? You can write it on there, but how do you know if the person does it? Even online, how do you know that the person responding is actually the youngest male? Whereas on telephone, you can hear the voice change and have that confirmation. The surveys look and feel very different from mail to phone to web. You can't just cut and paste one, depending on whether it's going to be read by the recipient or read over the phone. All of those things impact question design, survey flow. You do lose benefits of interviewer administration. We do find that with online, you tend to get those who are either really positive or really negative. The people who are kind of middle of the road are like, I don't feel like responding to it. The interviewer can, if they reach them on the phone, they can convince them that their opinion matters. Or if you have an open-ended question that says, how well did that product meet your needs? And the respondent may say, well, it's good. The interviewer could say, well, in what way was it good? Tell me more about that. When you're doing a mail survey or web survey, you're left with it's good. You don't have that, that deepness. But we do find that respondents may be more honest online than talking with an interview, and that can affect your results. Languages, how do you handle languages? Does everything have to go out in all the languages? Do you have web options, paper options? Can you do simultaneous translation? How does that work? And if you've been doing a survey in one mode, say telephone, and you want to translate that to multi-mode, there are some differences. It's another line in the sand. And how do you make sure that you don't lose some of your tracking by moving to multi-mode? And what things do you need to do to make sure that you preserve the data for tracking purposes? And then the back-end data processing. If you're not careful aligning all of those data, using the same code names, using the right labels, it can be a real nightmare lining up, 2 or 3 databases that are coming in from 2 or 3 different sources. Panels, again, like I said, are a blessing and a curse. They are great for broad general populations and diverse and hard to reach. But the quality measures taken by the panel sources are outdated. They are easily identified by professional panel respondents. There are panel websites for panelists who want to make money that teach them how to cheat and game the system and new ins and outs. And so you'll get fraudulent respondents, feeders, people who just fly through the survey so they can get their panel points. They know how to game the system. And unfortunately, many people using panels and hiring panels aren't doing enough to protect the integrity of the data from the panels themselves. They're trusting that the panel company has produced the people that they said they had, and they aren't double checking the data to make sure that everything is the way it needs to be. So it's important when you're using an online panel to understand and research panel companies. There are good panel companies and bad panel companies, just like there are in any other industry. Understand how they recruit, how do they manage, how do they control the quality, what systems do they have in place. Become educated yourself on ways that panelists cheat the system so that you can create your survey to try to circumvent that. So you hire a research team or have people on staff who know how to set up and evaluate panel surveys. And recognize the overall cost may not show as big of a savings as expected. You're like, wow, they're only charging me $3 per complete, but then you don't realize that it's taking you 90 hours to program the survey, and the 3 hours of project management that it's taking a day or an hour a day for your project manager to make sure that everything is clean. When we go through data, it is not surprising for us to throw out 15 to 20% of the surveys that make it through even our screening criteria, the initial screen that we find because we are going through and looking at each individual respondent. So don't make it obvious for the panelists to know what the screening criteria is. So don't say we're talking to Tempe residents about transportation, and then say, what do you live in Tempe? Well, the panelist obviously knows that they need to be from Tempe, so they yes. So you back it up and say, what city do you live in, or do you live in Arizona? And then what city do you live in? So they don't know what that is doing it. Ask questions to verify if they fit into your target groups. We can tell the sample company that we want to target 18 to 35-year-old males, And they will do that, but you'll be shocked if you ask and verify how many don't fit in that target group. And even we've got checks in there to verify their ages so that they can't, game the system and try to pretend to be the right age. We put in safety features that will catch fraudulent responses. Not all of them, of course, but that will really catch a lot of people. As I mentioned, continuously review the data from each individual respondent, look for patterns of responses that don't make sense. All of these things will help you protect the data and have more confidence that what the data that you are collecting is valid. And finally, just a quick note about text surveys. They can be very helpful in increasing respondent participation, but there are rules to be followed. And that same TCPA that controls your contacting them people's cell phone applies to texting. And you just can't automatically text people. You can't have a list of customers that you know are mobile phones and send out a text burst to everybody and ask them to complete a survey if they haven't opted in and agreed to participate. The penalties are enormous. And so you've got to be very careful to make sure that you've got participant permissions in hands. And make sure that you have the necessary documentation. If you're working with the research company, and make sure that you've got that. And we've had clients who say, "Oh yeah, I'm sure," and like, well, we need to see what they agreed to, because then as a research company, our hands are held to the fire if we are caught doing that. But it is very helpful when you have that approval to invite respondents to participate in the study, to remind study participants to complete a survey or task, to give them an option to text for help and communicate that way. Or even to complete a short survey directly. Please get rated something on a 1 to 10 scale and give me a reason why. You can, if you don't have a database, target groups can be invited via other communications. For example, we can post to social media, or we can put it on a postcard, or we can use a QR code that says, if you want to participate in a survey, text survey to this phone number, or scan this QR code and we'll open it up. And that way, by replying via text, they have opted in by replying, and then you can send a link back to them to the survey and follow up with them directly because they've opted in. So again, you've got, it's a great tool, but you've got to know what you're doing. So what does this all mean? I know I threw a lot at you in the last 40, 45 minutes. The good news is we have more tools than we've ever had before. And we can meet our clients' requests for quick, insightful, quality research that can meet their needs and give them the right information. But the options aren't as straightforward as they've been in the past. You've got to know what questions to ask. You've got to know the pitfalls of different methodologies. You've got to know which is going to be the best way to reach the participants. We have to understand who is responding, but also who is not responding. And what bias does that introduce, and how do you need to weight the data or correct the input of the information to make sure that everything is in alignment. So I hope we've given you some information to at least ask the right questions and know not to just assume that something is going to be done correctly or be understood, but make sure that you've got the right methodologies that are be using to get the quality data that you're looking for. And that's it.
Excellent work, Kathy. Thank you so very much. So we do have a couple questions here for you.
Okay.
So the very first question we have is, you talked about it, about right now with the methods, we're having to do things a little differently. People aren't really going door to door. Maybe the mailers aren't as high as they were in the beginning of COVID. And so, what are you finding is the best method? You mentioned online, but could you maybe go into a little more detail about that, of what platforms you're using, or really how are you reaching people online?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think actually what we found, we could reassure a lot of our clients on telephone that, we've been moving a lot from telephone to online, and just because people weren't picking up their telephones. And we were finding that, it's not a bad time to do telephone research. Especially on the quantitative end, online is always there and it's always a good source. So using that. On the qualitative side, I mean, that definitely for the last 6 months has all moved online. You just can't do in person. You're not, we weren't allowed to congregate in groups of more than 5 people. Nobody was going out or doing anything. So we had to push things online. I think one of the challenges that we have encountered, and I've talked to other researchers who cite this too, is that because we just need information right now, we have to acknowledge that maybe we can't be as diligent on covering and making it as representative as possible or as random as possible. We just need information. So let's use every source we have available to us to send out a survey link. So we're sending out emails to people we know. We're pushing it out on Twitter and Facebook and web pages, just because we need input. We've just got to have insight, and we recognize that it's not. And there's one thing I do want to point out is that in doing these quick and fast surveys, always make sure you get demographic information so that you at least know who is responding and what the potential bias is, so that you can apply corrections or interpret the data correctly. I had a client call me when they were doing a web survey, and they were like, well, how do we make sure that we've got a representative sample? And I said, well, what demographics do you have? And they said, well, the research company didn't ask any demographics. So they had thousands of responses, but they didn't know if they were all from old people or young people or males or females or bikers, or they had no clue. They just had 1,000 responses. So even if you're doing it fast and recognize that that's not the best way, if you at least ask the key demographics that mirror your population, you can know and understand who's responding and who's not responding and adjust accordingly.
Perfect. And, when you're talking about responding and not responding, I know you mentioned, getting the 30 and below age demographic is, herding cats. How would you recommend, getting quality, surveys and information from that demographic?
If somebody has a real good solution for it, please let us know. I mean, web is by far the best. We can, we find the panel companies, actually, a lot of the younger folks are on panels. So whether it's an internal database you have or a panel company database, that's been probably our primary go-to for that population is to work through, or we target specific venues or situations where we know we are going to find those. But primarily it's just through panel and trying through online.
Excellent. Now this next question is a little bit of a definition question, and I hope I say this correctly, but what is a triad versus a dyad, D-A-Y-A-D?
Yeah, so it's 2 people versus 3 people. So you've got one interviews, or you're talking to 2 people in a dyad, or 3 people in a triad.
Perfect. Yeah, I knew that was going to be probably an industry no question that you were like, yeah, obviously. So wonderful. Thank you for us newbies understanding that. And so then also we're curious, how often is text-based discussion used?
Yeah, again, it depends on the environment. It's going to work well with, again, a younger group than it is with an older group. And so if you've got a database of users of perhaps of a particular product that maybe they've already opted in for, that sort of thing, or you can recruit them to a platform that's a chat platform and just create that. So it really depends on the population that you're trying to reach, but it's not typically seen as a general population sort of thing. It's usually more to target a niche group.
Okay, so would you use then perhaps like a chat bot of sorts for Facebook if you wanted to connect with a demographic that is primarily on Facebook?
Something like that, yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, those were the questions I had. We still have some time, so please don't be shy, everyone. Feel free to either post your questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question.
I do have one question. Kathy, you were just saying about that situation where a company had collected all that data, but they didn't have any of the demographic information. So is there anything you can do with that data then? Like if someone handed that to you, I mean, other than we have 1,000 people and, 700 said yes and 300 said
Right.
no. I'm just wondering what
Yeah.
kind of, like, how can we make the save?
Right. And my thought is that you treat it more along the lines of qualitative input. Qualitative research is done to provide direction. It's supposed to give you the range of responses out there, um, and the depth of responses out there, but isn't supposed to be used to project. Just because 8 out of 10 focus group participants think it's important doesn't mean that 80% of the population thinks it's important. So you can still, obviously, it's data. And so you can look and see, okay, this is the direction things seem to be pointing. Here's some good open-ended responses that can, provide us. So obviously you don't just, chuck it out, but you've got to take it with some temperance, because you just don't know what the bias is in the sample. And without knowing that bias, it may be great data. It may be a wonderful sample, but if you don't know, you've just got to be careful how you apply it.
Got it. Okay.
Wonderful.
If there's no other questions, Kathy, thank you very much. That was excellent. And, I also learn a lot when I, attend these seminars. And one thing a couple of things that your presentation really make me think about is, I think we all kind of take a casual thought process to this, like, oh, I know how to create survey questions, or, maybe I will do the DIY, because how hard is a survey, to create? But it really made me think about all the number of considerations that really go into every market research campaign. And I think a lot of the things you showed, and people are going to get to review your presentation again, but I think a lot of the things you showed are things that I sat there saying, oh, I didn't think about that, or, I wouldn't have thought about that. So that's a really good point, that a really great takeaway for me, and I'm sure a lot of other marketers on this call feel the same way. And then also just, multi-mode data collection, that it really is something that we need to consider if we want to get the right data sample for our campaigns. We
Accomplished.
Yeah, we might go into something thinking, oh, we just need a call campaign, or just, an online survey, but that we really do and should consider going beyond that to get the information we're really looking for.
And that still may be the case. I mean, it still may be appropriate that telephone is the best way to reach that population. Or we had a client, Silver Sneakers, which was a response for 60 plus people on their fitness. And we were doing mail surveys because they all felt comfortable. We were getting a 25 to 50% response rate. We wouldn't use that necessarily for others, but it was great for that population. So not everything is going to be mixed mode, but like you say, just being aware that there are options and questioning, are we going to be able to reach everybody, and who are we leaving out if we decide to only go with one method? Then just understand who's not responding as well as who is responding.
Right.
So we have two other questions that popped into the chat. One is from Bill. He is wondering, are there any categories of research that are still better for a research company to conduct rather than a company to try to do themselves?
We personally would say all of it.
Yeah.
But I think when you start getting into really needing statistically defensible data, that you want it to be representative, and you really need a research expert who can help you to design the questions appropriately, to make sure that you're controlling for bias, and having that statistically defensible and projectable. If you're making decisions on the data, you want to make sure that the questions are being asked correctly. So Bill, I appreciate the plug, but yes, it is very important, I think, now more than ever, just because the world is turned up so upside down, that you really need a research professional who thinks about these things 24/7, and not just the occasion, once a year when you need to do something.
And Kathy, when you say, asking the right questions, I think that includes the unconscious bias that the lay person, even if we're marketers, may not realize is being inserted into a question or leading a question, which again produces the wrong results. Like they may answer the question, but it might not be exactly the correct result because of the way it was asked.
Correct. Yep.
And then we have another question from Steph, wondering if you had the contact information for respondents, and let's say you didn't have their demographics, would it be appropriate to reach back to them to ask for those demographic questions?
It does happen, that sometimes questions get skipped or whatever, and you contact people. They may or may not, the hit rate on that is pretty low. But at the same point, if you have it, then it's a possibility to use that as an option to contact them. You're certainly not going to fill out of 1,000 surveys, you may be lucky to recontact, half at best, but it's really
But even at that, that still can narrow some answers down.
Exactly. It can help hopefully give you some idea of, okay, who exactly is in the database.
Right, right.
And if you noticed a trend at all with that, would you assume that if there was a trend that maybe the second half who didn't respond would be the same, or would you not even go down that route?
Again, because it's an opt-in thing, there's probably something unique about those people who were willing to talk to you again that's different from those who refused, and we don't know what that bias is. So again, you're making an assumption that just because you reached them, they mirror the people who you didn't reach, and you don't know that.
Right.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. Well, anyone else have last questions?
Okay.
Nope.
That was excellent. And actually those last 2 points were really good points. So Kathy, again, thank you very much for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it. And I know that I learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone on the call feels the same way. I look forward to reviewing your presentation with the recording and the actual presentation. So everyone on the call, you will get the link to the recording plus the actual presentation that will come from me. So thank you. And I just would like to real quick remind everybody of upcoming events. We have 3 more webinars for the remainder of the year. I know, hard to believe that we're already saying November and December, but our next event is Wednesday. It's a lunchtime event, so at 11:30, October 28th. So that's about 3 weeks from today. And Brett Farmelo, who is the CEO of Marketors, is going to be speaking on how SEO and content marketing work together to fuel your online success. And I'm quite sure that's going to be a great presentation. SEO is its own science and art form. So please tune back in with us. We would love to see you again. Keep an eye out on our website, amaphoenix.org, for the upcoming events. And want to thank our sponsors once again. Again, I want to point out Taylor, our host from Financial Potion. If you have any video needs, please give her a call. Eileen Burek from Burek Communication Design, who is our designer at the AMA Phoenix, and she's great to work with. And then again, WestGroup, we thank you for the many, many, many years of support that you've given us. And as you can see, they are experts in their business, so please, and in their industry, so please consider giving them a call if you have a need for market research. And then we would like to thank our supporters once again, those companies that help our board members become very productive board members by offering their support to them. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate it, and have a great remainder of your Thursday afternoon. And see you again soon, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.